It's the penultimate round of the season for the Ginetta Racing Championships. It's the business end of the year, and we arrive for the second time this season to Donington Park and the fabulous Grand Prix circuit, which will play host to another set of races across all three of the Ginetta Championships. And we're kicking things off here on a slightly soggy afternoon with the Protyre Motorsport Ginetta GT Championship, their first of three races here at Donington, before the championship will conclude on the equally magnificent Brands Hatch Grand Prix circuit at the end of the year. It may be damp, it may be grey, but it is not cold this afternoon, thankfully, so that I hope, now that the rain has passed through, will continue the drying process of the track over the course of this race, because it is a bit damp and greasy out there. Tyre choice may well come into play. We've seen that a few times earlier on this season, and at this point of the season, with championships on the line, it's really not the kind of conditions that the drivers would have liked to have been dealing with. Andy McEwen here in the commentary box to talk you through the action during this race and the rest of the Ginetta action this weekend. And these Ginetta GT Championship cars set to hopefully put on a show for the pretty sizable crowd that we've got here at Donington Park today for a slightly grey and gloomy Saturday afternoon. Plenty of people still coming along to enjoy a day of qualifying and racing. A lot more racing to come, of course, tomorrow. One race apiece for the Ginetta Championships today and two more on the Sunday, which we believe at the moment, if you choose to believe the weather forecasters, should be a completely dry day. Green flag lap then gets underway, and spectators trackside beginning maybe to place their bets as to who the winner will be of this race. Of course, the outcome of this race could be very significant for the championships. One championship in particular that could end up being decided today. More on that a little bit later perhaps, but certainly at the front of the field, Nick White and Mckenzie Douglas set to do battle. Nick White is the man on the cusp of winning the amateur championship, and for an AM driver to be on outright pole position, that sort of goes to show the dominance in his class that he's had. Mckenzie Douglas is the points leader in the pro class. He starts alongside, ahead of the Garlick siblings. Luke ahead of Connor this time, sharing row 2. Third row of the grid then for Alex Todd-Jones and Harry Mangan. The fourth row of the grid is where you find Alfie Davis and Callum Noble, the Breakall Racing Pro driver ahead of the Xentek Motorsport AM entrant. Then it's Peter Mangan and Josh McLean, another AM and Pro, sharing the fifth row of the grid. And at the tail end of the 12-car field, we'll have Gracie Mitchell and Paolo Buccini, the Australian driver, running for SVG Motorsport. So, coming in to this round then, as I said, Mckenzie Douglas with the points advantage anyway, within the pro category. The Fox Motorsport driver has managed to net himself a whole handful of race victories over the course of the season. He's done far more winning than anybody else. He arrives here 87 points clear of Luke Garlick in the championship chase. Luke is then a further 36 points clear of Connor Garlick in second position. So Mckenzie knows that if he has a good day today, that'll set him up potentially tomorrow to wrap the championship up with races to spare. In the AM class, meanwhile, Nick White essentially just needs to see a checkered flag. If he can see the end of this race trouble-free, then he more or less has done enough, we believe, to wrap up the amateur championship. Matt Shaw, absent this weekend, was his nearest challenger, but Peter Mangan, third in the championship, only 18 points further back, so he could still pose a threat if things all go a little bit wrong for Nick White. But Nick has sort of become a bit of a Donington specialist over the years, always seems to go well here. He went well here in his GT Academy racing days and has continued that impressive pace through into the Protyre Motorsport Ginetta GT Championship proper, so expecting good things from him, and he'd love, I'm sure, to start taking some more overall race victories now as we move towards the business end of the season. Also worth mentioning, Raceway Motorsport and Xentek Motorsport are still pretty close in the teams championship too, so we'll try and monitor that as we go through the weekend as well. So a damp and greasy circuit, then a 2x2 rolling start for the drivers. And who is going to get into Redgate Corner first? Who will claim the first victory of the weekend then at Donington? It is time to find out. 20 minutes on the clock, the red lights go out, and Nick White tries to get the better of the professional championship leader Mckenzie Douglas into turn 1, but Mckenzie seems to have had the better of the jumps. He's sideways under braking though, and Nick White, despite being on the wet line, is later on the brakes. He almost careers into the side of Douglas. They both wash out wide, and Luke Garlick sees his opportunity, pulls alongside Nick White for the lead, and will challenge for position number 1 heading down the hill. Nick White contests it on the inside line though. Nick White getting his elbows out here and not making life easy at all for Garlick. They are still side by side at the old hairpin, and in the wet, the momentum, the grip, the traction's on the outside line, and that favours Nick White, who gets through ahead of Luke Garlick, who has a job to see where he's going, the state of that windscreen already, but Nick White not wanting to be pushed around by the pros this afternoon, is he? He's back in front, and where has Mckenzie Douglas gone? He's only 4th, so from a championship perspective, Luke Garlick may not have got the overall race lead, but he has got himself ahead of Mckenzie Douglas, and remember, they were 87 points apart coming into this weekend. And you score 35 points for a win, a bonus point for a fastest lap, a bonus point for starting on pole position, and that's all within your class, so it's not your overall finishing position that matters, it's the class position. And therefore, Luke Garlick in a good position right now. Alex Toth-Jones, look, has moved up into 2nd place from 5th on the grid, excuse me, but under threat now from Mckenzie Douglas, who launches up the inside into the very greasy Melbourne hairpin braking zone. He runs a bit wide though. Toth-Jones sees the chance to get the switch back, and has he cleared the 24 car? Yes, he has. So Mckenzie Douglas, not having things his own way at all, stays in 4th position. And of course, the next car behind him, that's the number 74 of Alfie Davis, another pro driver. So there are more points that could get lost here for Mckenzie Douglas if he's not too careful. Nick White then leads the opening lap. Luke Garlick slots into 2nd position. Those two getting away already. 1.5 seconds the gap back then to Toth-Jones in 3rd. Douglas 4th. 5th position for Davis. There is Mckenzie Douglas then, points leader, by what looks on the face of it like a very healthy margin, but we've seen this happen before, not only in Ginetta Championships, in many series over the years, where a driver can get to this part of the season with a good points advantage and then perhaps just take their eye off the ball slightly. I'm saying that's what's happened to Mckenzie Douglas here. I'm sure he's as focused and determined as ever, but so far this afternoon, things not quite going to plan. You can see there's very much a dry racing line, isn't there? It looks to me like everyone's on wet tyres. Off, though, I'm afraid, has gone the 19 of Callum Noble down at the old hairpin. Now, that may be one of the cars not on wet tyres then, because he clearly was struggling in the conditions, and that was Luke Garlick getting sideways as well, going into coppice. Did he gather that together? No! Luke Garlick's gone around. Luke Garlick, he was in a prime position to get some points back on Mckenzie Douglas, and off he goes. So that is disaster for Luke Garlick. Great news for Mckenzie Douglas, and Mckenzie Douglas then all of a sudden finds himself back in the pound seat again, and might now use that as a bit of inspiration to find a way back ahead of Toth-Jones. He's back up the inside line again now. Alex, of course, has been in this position once already. Will there be another switch back, or has Mckenzie Douglas got his braking point right this time? I think he has, hasn't he? So Mckenzie Douglas, all of a sudden, things falling into his lap, and he slips through into what is 2nd place overall, but the lead of the class as the safety car is scrambled. Now, Nick White will not be best pleased to see that, because he all of a sudden found himself with what must have been getting on for a 4 or 5 second lead maybe at that point, but that will evaporate now, and he'll have the Pro Championship leader right behind him. This is what happened to Callum Noble. That, to me, looks like a car on slick tyres. The yellow sidewalled Pirelli tyres, I'm pretty sure, are the slicks, and that was a car that just didn't have any traction. What about Luke Garlick, though? On board with him, turns in, the car goes light over the top of the crest. That's quite a common mistake to make, actually, up at the top of Coppice Corner, especially in greasy conditions where the grip levels aren't where the drivers would like them. Turned in, lost the rear, and around he went. Now, there are winners and losers whenever you have a safety car period, of course. The loser, as we've already sort of said, Nick White. The winner, Luke Garlick, because he gets to close back in on the tail of the group, although I don't see him in that picture. So did Luke Garlick stall the car? Is he still stuck up at Coppice Corner? No, I think he has crossed the line. Yes, I can see him out the window, just gone down through Hollywood. So he was delayed, but will now be able to tag onto the back of the train. And therefore not out of this one yet, but as it stands, Mckenzie Douglas in a very handy position. There's Callum Noble. Yeah, they look like slick tyres to me, and slick tyres possibly are the quicker tyre, but only if you can keep it on that very narrow, dry racing line. The track just not drying as quickly as I sort of expected it to, really. It is very humid here this afternoon, and I wonder if that's, there's a lot of moisture in the air. I wonder if that's the reason that the track isn't really drying as much as you'd expect, given the relatively high ambient temperature. Luke Garlick then has caught up to the back of the pack now. Luckily, no damage on the car. Would have been very easy for somebody else to come slithering in there and collide with his stationary vehicle. That didn't happen, mercifully. So he's able now to settle onto the back of the train. He's got lots of overtaking to do now if he's going to challenge Mckenzie Douglas for a class victory. Mckenzie had a lot of success here on the Grand Prix circuit earlier on in the season, winning all 3 races actually that weekend, and didn't drop a single point. He qualified on pole position. He set the fastest lap in all 3 races, and took maximum points from his last visit to Donington Park. That is the only time he's achieved maximum points over a weekend, but he did win all 3 races at Snetterton last time out as well. But dropped the fastest lap point in the second race in the end to Conor Garlick. Now, I was rather hoping we'd only have to have 1 lap behind the safety car, but it looks like we're getting a second one. So whilst Callum Noble's car may be more or less out of the way, of course it's not just getting the car out of harm's way that we need to see. We also need the marshals out of the way, the recovery vehicles to be back in their correct parking spots. So another lap behind the safety car. Then you can see a lot of drivers, almost all of the drivers actually, doing everything they can to cool the tyres down, except for, interestingly, Mckenzie Douglas, who is weaving around very aggressively. Now, surely Mackenzie's not gone for the slicks, has he? He's the only driver not really running on the wet part of the road. Well, he is sort of there, I suppose, but that's really because he's weaving. Now, the point I'm trying to make is that if you're on a wet tyre, it's not a soaking wet track, so over the course of 20 minutes there's a chance those tyres might start to overheat. That's why the other drivers are running on the wet line behind the safety car to cool the tyres down, capitalise on this safety car. It means that they can give themselves and the tyres a bit of a breather. If you were, hypothetically, on a slick tyre, you would not necessarily be doing that, and that's kind of what I see from Douglas. There he is, look, going through. Can't quite see the tyres, but that would be quite the gamble to take, though, wouldn't it, given the championship position that he is in. Doesn't really need to be taking any risks, just needs to be banking the points. There we go. Yes, yellow sidewalls. I think he's on slick tyres, you know. I reckon Mckenzie Douglas has gone for the slicks, and that's why he is so busily weaving the car from left to right to try and keep the temperature up, whereas everybody else is trying to cool the tyres as much as possible. Well, if he can keep it on the road, that could be an inspired decision. We've just seen how easy it is to lose control. Just ask Callum Noble, who incidentally is back in the pit lane now, but likely won't be allowed to take any further part in the race. The team will go to work clearing the gravel from all of the places that it finds itself. But if Mckenzie Douglas can avoid that same fate in the second half of the race, I think this could really come to him. So an interesting dynamic immediately at the front of the pack there. You can see those yellow sidewall tyres. That says to me that he has gone for a slightly different tyre strategy to the majority of the field. I did have a feeling someone would try it. I didn't necessarily expect that someone to be the championship leader. But anyway, let's see how this goes. He's already, remember, in a class-winning position. Doesn't need to beat Nick White to score the maximum points because Nick is in the AM class. Nick also, at the moment, doing enough, we believe, to wrap up the title in that category. How much will he be willing to put on the line to win a race? Well, he was pretty feisty on the opening lap, wasn't he? So might well put up a bit more opposition to Mckenzie Douglas than Douglas is expecting. Let's see what happens then. We've got 11.5 minutes left on the clock. The safety car's in the pit lane, and Nick White leads the field to the waving of the green flag. And a restart here with just over half the race to go. Nick White with a couple of car lengths advantage heading towards Redgate Corner. Keep an eye on Top Jones there in third. The blue car peeking to the inside of Mckenzie Douglas, who will be a little tentative here on cold tyres, you would have thought. Although maybe gained a length over Nick through the first corner. Now down through the crane of curves. This is where it all went wrong for Callum Noble. You can see the spray being kicked up behind the cars, even on that racing line actually, but Nick White is the one who runs wide. So Mckenzie Douglas has done a good job behind that safety car of keeping the tyres in their ideal operating window. Here, of course, is the other side of this championship story. Luke Garlick in his fight back through the field, which hasn't really begun yet, I don't think. I don't think he's overtaken anybody just yet, but he is at least in touching distance. Through McLean's corner they go then, still White the leader, Douglas going with him in second position. You can see the body language of the cars, how they differ. The cars on wet tyres, they're in a sort of constant state of sliding, a nice gradual controlled slide through the corners. The slick-shod cars, much dartier, much livelier, but Mckenzie Douglas seems much quicker, doesn't he, than Nick White, who has to defend the lead into the chicane as they head through the S's then onto the Melbourne loops. Still it is the AM driver in front, but for how much longer? He's out on the curb, he's out on the dirt, and here comes Mckenzie Douglas. Now Douglas has got the inside line, but that of course is the wetter side of the road. Can he get the car stopped? He's just fighting the car into the apex, gets there first, parks it in front of Nick White, and that was a really brave move actually in the circumstances on those slick tyres to get through into the lead of the race. So Douglas to the front. It doesn't change anything in the points because, as I said, he was already leading his class. This, meanwhile, the fight behind for third place overall, second in the pro category. And is that another yellow sidewall tyre I spot on Conor Garlick's car, maybe? That number 63 certainly didn't seem to have a huge amount of grip going through the Goddard's hairpin. And I wonder whether he's also gone for the slick tyre gamble. The third car in this queue, car number 63, turning in. And yes, he too has gone for the slick. So I think this is going to benefit him. Probably not going to yield a race victory because Mckenzie Douglas, you would expect to now check out in front of the field, which, as you can see in the distance, he already is, but Conor Garlick with a bit more overtaking to do than Mckenzie Douglas. That might just hamper him, at least in these early stages before the track dries out anymore. One with Luke Garlick, by the way, 3 places gained in the end, found a way past Puccini, Mitchell and McLean, so that, I reckon, is Peter Mangin in front. Yes, it is, the white car with the red go faster stripes, as there at the inside of Conor Garlick slips the number 74 car, so that's Alfie Davis. Now, Garlick was behind him at the start of the lap, so they traded positions once already, and now Davis goes back through. He sort of levers Garlick out over the very wet and slippery curb, turning into Coppice Corner. And this is the danger for Conor Garlick, to overtake these cars on the wet tyres. He has to go onto the wet side of the road, and that is fraught with danger. He's up the inside again into the chicane. Is he late enough on the brakes? The answer, I fear, is going to be no, and Alfie Davis will hang on, runs wide though. Is there an opportunity for a switchback? Yes, there is, and Conor Garlick should now be able to make that move pretty easily. I think it's fair to say Davis was keen to get back over to the inside line, though, to try and defend from the 44 of Harry Mangin. They all sort of come together at the apex. There's a bit of touchy-feely stuff there between Mangin and Davis, and it is Harry who slips through, so yeah, that was a little bit rough maybe, but Harry Mangin gets the place anyway. I don't think Davis appreciated that. He's back up the inside at the hairpin, gets back through by the looks of it, so good battle. This all happening right in front, of course, of Luke Garlick, who was giving us a grandstand view of all of that. Luke now pulls up alongside as his brother Conor moves on to challenge Alex Toth-Jones for 3rd position. That will stay the same, at least on the way into Redgate Corner. Likewise, Luke Garlick hasn't yet got around Harry Mangin, but he's had a better exit from Redgate, gets his nose to the inside into Hollywood. Harry wants to close the door, but just can't quite get there. Through will go Luke, and Conor has now dispatched Alex Toth-Jones as well. Suddenly the cars on the wet tyres are the ones moving around a lot more than those on the slicks. Oh, and a big slide there for Harry Mangin as he sort of proves my point, turning into the old hairpin. A black and white warning flag, by the way, for Joshua McLean in the number 76 car. For, guess what, track limits. Incredibly difficult to keep the car within the white lines in these conditions, of course. The old hairpin, I would imagine, the most likely spot that they're being pinged for that. Luke Garlick, though, needs to keep on overtaking cars, which he is. He's back up the inside again now, another place to be gained here, and that was Alfie Davis, who looked pretty strong earlier on, didn't he? But now seems to be fading a little bit as we get into the middle part of the race. And he now will resume that battle that he was having earlier on with Harry Mangin. Harry might have a little bit of retaliation on his mind, although he runs a bit wide coming out of the Fogarty S's. Still carries good momentum down the hill, jinks to the inside, but in the end not close enough to commit to the move. Mckenzie Douglas, by the way, led by 2.6 seconds at the end of the previous lap. That will likely have extended again because he's just on the fastest lap of the race, a 1:40.0. Look at that, that's not 3.5 seconds anymore, is it? It is 6.5 seconds back to Nick White, who still leads his class, though, in 2nd place. So from a championship perspective, both drivers will be happy. Here comes Luke Garlick, though, who's back up the inside of Alex Toth-Jones. Garlick has gone through as well, and Luke Garlick has made pretty short work of that group, actually. I expected that to be a bit trickier for him. Oh, and very out of shape, Alfie Davis. I don't think he meant to go for the overtake there, but he committed to it anyway and has gone past Alex Toth-Jones, who I suspect was a bit spooked at the sight of a sideways number 74 car coming up the inside. So Alfie Davis slips through then. Luke Garlick with so much pace, I have to wonder whether he's on the slick tyres as well. That would make sense, wouldn't it? Because, of course, he had that spin at Coppice earlier on. That's not really a Luke Garlick kind of mistake to make. So I wonder whether both of the Garlick brothers have gone for that tyre call. Harry Mangin then on the tail of Alex Toth-Jones. Alfie Davis now ahead of both of them. Toth-Jones, I think, is going to lose another one, is he? Yes, left the door open for Harry Mangin, but the grip on the outside line still, particularly on the wet tyres, gives Alex Toth-Jones enough momentum up the hill to stay in front for now. Turning their way around Coppice Corner, out onto the exhibition straight. There is Luke Garlick. Look how he's checked out from that group now. At the start of the lap, he was 5 seconds exactly behind his brother in 3rd position, but was over 3 seconds slower than him on the previous lap because of the fact that he was battling with the 3 drivers on your screen right now. So Clean Air, how's he going? Well, Luke Garlick in the 1st sector was 4/10 slower than his brother. In the 2nd sector, 9/10 slower, so that gap's not coming down. So it might be that 4th place and 3rd in class is as good as it will get here for Luke, who will be ruining that spin in the early stages. There he comes towards us, up into the final hairpin, and behind. These drivers all now struggling with less and less grip by the lap. Here's a good battle. Peter Mangan up the inside of the 61 of Gracie Mitchell. Now that is for second place in the AM class. And 73 behind, well, that is Paolo Puccini, also in the AM class. So this is the fight essentially for the two lower steps on the AM podium. Harry Mangan there on the outside of Alex Todd-Jones, still hasn't found a way through. Looking for the switchback, he's carrying good speed off the corner. I think this might just work now. They're door handle to door handle down the hill, but the momentum lies with the blue and orange car of Harry Mangan, who will sweep through. Willys on the wet side of the road, but yes, gets to the old hairpin first. That was a really committed pass down the Craner curves. It's a difficult enough place to go side by side in the best of times. In these conditions, even more perilous, but really nicely done that by Mangan, who slips through. Replay here then on board with Josh McLean down at the Melbourne hairpin, and that was an assault from Peter Mangan, who suddenly appeared out of nowhere and clattered into the side of that car. And we've also got the number 24 car. Well, this is Mckenzie Douglas coming down the hill. I thought going slowly for a moment, but no, seems to be running just fine. All on his own, isn't he? There's no one else in sight. Where is Nick White? He still hasn't come out of the Melbourne hairpin. There goes Douglas. Look at the gap that he has pulled over Nick White, who, remember, we believe is on the wet tyres. That's the difference it makes. Nick White, in the same conditions, on the same tyres, is every bit as quick as Mckenzie Douglas these wet days. But that's the advantage those slick tyres have for the race leader. White now, in fact, coming under threat from Luke Garlick for second place in the race, but as we've said earlier on, doesn't make any difference for class positions, doesn't make any difference for championship points. And Nick White, who's had this sensational run this year, on the verge of the championship already. Nick White has won all but one race this season in the AM class. The one race he didn't win was the season opener at Alton Park, which was won by Matt Shaw. So actually, after Alton Park, it really looked like being a ding-dong fight between the two of them. But Matt then had two non-finishes in the two other races at Alton. And from that point on, really, Nick White's never looked back and has regularly been taking the fight to the pro drivers, which he's doing again now, but he really has brought a knife to the gunfight here, hasn't he? He's on the wrong tyre, he's not got the grip, and Luke Garlick, you have to imagine, will find a way through relatively easily. He's been catching Nick White to the tune of 4 seconds a lap, and has much more speed coming out of McLean's corner, nips to the inside into Coppice. It's very wet up at the top end of the circuit. He commits to the inside line anyway. He's got enough heat in the tyres that doesn't really matter, and he manages to slip through pretty easily. So Luke Garlick then into second place, but Nick White still on course for a really good result as far as his championship hopes are concerned in the AM class. We'll obviously get all of the points tallied up and everything confirmed after this race, but we do believe he's doing enough at the moment to put everybody else out of reach in the championship. Back to the Peter Mangan and Gracie Mitchell battle. They've detached themselves slightly now from Paolo Puccini. So second and third places in the AM class, looking likely to settle this between themselves. Not a million miles behind Alex Todd-Jones, are they? Whose pace has really deserted him in the second half of the race. 1 minute and 10 to go. Mckenzie Douglas has already come through to start his final lap of the race, so these guys have got just over a lap to go, but Mckenzie Douglas already racing down towards the old hairpin for the final time. Garlick 18.2 seconds back. This then really one of the last battles that needs to resolve itself. And there is the number 73 of Paolo Puccini. Started off the back of the grid. His qualifying time, a 1 minute 50.0, was 2 and a bit seconds slower than the likes of Peter Mangan, who's only just up the road from him. So in these conditions particularly, impressive stuff this from the inexperienced Puccini. Head down towards Redgate Corner as this battle refuses to die, doesn't it? This has been a great scrap between Alfie Davis and Harry Mangan, and once again they're getting touchy-feely going out of Redgate Corner as Mangan tried to get the switchback and Davis tried to close the door. He succeeded in doing that, and so it is still car number 74 in front, but he's very wide through the Craner curves, just keeps it on the island, but that was a bit too much commitment. He's got no grip from the tyres at all, even on the wet side of the road. I don't think either of them have an abundance of grip, but certainly Davis is hanging on by the skin of his teeth here. Harry Mangan almost pushing him up the hill through Starkeys and Schwantz curve, and then into the first of the two right-handers at the top end of the circuit. This one being McLean's corner, the back of the 74 car, just refusing to follow the front axle. He slides his way out of the turn. Mckenzie Douglas, meanwhile, is already at the checkered flag. He has had, all things considered, a relatively easy time of it. Another vital win and another vital haul of points towards his championship challenge, and he will further extend his margin over Luke Garlick, who really will be ruining that spin earlier on in the race. What is going to happen here, though? This, remember, for 5th place overall, but it's by far far the best battle on the track, really. These two have traded a bit of paint on a few occasions in this race already. There goes Conor Garlick through for second position. And in the background, Nick White will come through to claim yet another victory. That's his 15th win from 16 races in the AM class, and it might just be the one that seals the deal in the championship for him. Luke Garlick will come through to claim fourth, which is a class podium, at least, within the pro class. And you can see there, no, he definitely was on the wet tyres, not the slick. So the Garlick siblings, interestingly, going different ways in that one. Now, what of Mangan and Davis? Well, that's Mangan ahead of Davis now. So Mangan's gone through, Davis is on the grass, can't get back to him, and Harry Mangan, we missed the pass, unfortunately, but a great battle that between the two of them, and it is going to be Harry Mangan who comes home fifth, Davis sixth, Alex Toth-Jones seventh, Peter Mangan hangs on to eighth, which is second in class, and actually Gracie Mitchell almost lost out to Paolo Buccini there. Those two were virtually alongside each other at the line, but it was Mitchell who beat Buccini by a quarter of a second, and then damage to the Josh McLean car. That was after the collision that he had with Peter Mangan earlier in the race, of course. Those drivers just finishing the race. Mckenzie Douglas has almost finished his victory lap as he heads down into the Melbourne Loop, celebrating another race victory. And you could argue it was the tyre choice that won him that race, but he kept the car on the road when Luke Garlick didn't, and Luke was on the wets. So if you'd have expected either of them to be slipping off in the early stages, the safer money would have been with Mckenzie, but he kept it pointing in the right direction and comes home to win by nearly 20 seconds in the end. Conor Garlick second place, and Nick White gets another race win, his 15th of the year in the AM class, and we think seals the class championship. Luke Garlick fourth, Harry Mangan fifth ahead of Alfie Davis, then Alex Toth-Jones and Peter Mangan fending off Gracie Mitchell and Paolo Buccini for that second place in the AM class. Mitchell got third and Buccini ended up in fourth. Josh McLean, walking wounded slightly there, finished in 11th overall, and Callum Noble, the only non-finisher in the end after that slide into the gravel trap at the old hairpin on those slick tyres early on. So, an entertaining opening race of the weekend for the Protyre Motorsport Ginetta GT Championship. Mckenzie Douglas and a couple of others had taken the gamble to start on slicks, and that meant that he was overtaken not only by Nick White, but by Luke Garlick through the first corner. Luke Garlick thought he had the race lead, but White wasn't having any of it and managed to fight his way back through. Then Callum Noble, also on slick tyres, found out just how tough the going would be by looping it into the gravel at Coppers, and Luke Garlick nearly did the same up at the top of the circuit, losing control, keeping it out of the gravel though. And after a brief safety car period to move Noble's car, Garlick was back at the races. Having done a really good job to keep his tyres up to temperature behind the safety car, Mckenzie Douglas was the form man upon the restart, found a way quickly past Nick White, and then scarpered into the distance, leaving the others to put on some entertaining battles behind him. Luke Garlick was charging through the field, would eventually make it back onto the class podium, but only after an entertaining tussle with, among others, Alex Toth-Jones, Alfie Davis and Harry Mangan. But after some good side-by-side racing, he was able to work his way through. Likewise, Conor Garlick, also on slicks, was up ahead of Nick White to finish in second position. It was another win, though, for Mckenzie Douglas in the pro class, and a great result for Nick White as well to put one hand on the AM Championship trophy.